I'm so pumped. Pump it up, pump it up, pump it up, pump it up.
Right. You know what? Our swanbitcoin.com/Stacy. Those purchases, those smash buys have been working out well because you saw us on our last microdose. I smash bought $2,100 worth of Bitcoin and it went up, it went up, it went up.
Number go up. Number go up. Technology. Smash buy at Swan. Well, Swan, they introduced the smash buy. So you can just log on and smash buy. And the second they launched it, volume exploded because people want Bitcoin. And I know the last 2 weeks, Stacy, I've been experimenting with all the Bitcoin apps.
Yes, I know you have. You've tried all of them. You tried Casa, you tried Kraken, you tried, Cash App, a few of them.
Coinbase, and I tried them all. And I reviewed them and the whole interface and everything. And without a doubt, Swan was the best. It's got the best interface. It's the easy. Primarily what's great about it is that you can do the smash buy and you get the guaranteed price at the smash buy. And then it'll draw from your bank, right? So that might take however long a bank draw takes. It may take a few hours, may take a day or two. But all these other services, for example, you got to draw the money first. You got to wait a day or two. That's one of the drawbacks. Kraken, the security in Kraken is extraordinary, but it took 6 days to get the funds over there. And then I had to interact with somebody and send them a screenshot of my actual, of what was going on and blah, blah, blah. Right. So, with Swan, it's just get the smash buy right away. And I'm smash buying. I must have, what can I say? I mean, my cost basis for Bitcoin now, it was under $10. Now it's probably closer to $50.
Right. You notice that we have our Christmas lights up here because we are about to celebrate Christmas. Max and I are officially on vacation. You are part of our vacation. We bring you along. We take you to whatever exotic location we go to. But we're taking a little bit over 2 weeks off from Kaiser Report. We've pre-recorded this stuff, so don't stress out. But we're just here for swanbitcoin.com sponsored programming on Orange Pill Podcast.
Oh, definitely. What can I say? The Orange Pill Podcast has got over 54,000 subscribers on YouTube already. It's got tens of thousands of downloads already on the podcast, on the download services. We're working on getting 10,000 people in the Orange Pill Telegram group now, which is, if you're a Bitcoin maxi and you want to keep to the path and not get involved in the shit coins and the altcoins and all that stuff, that'll just break your heart. Come to the Orange Pill Telegram group at t.me/Orange Pill. Stacy.
Right. Again, our new sponsor. So welcome them all and go visit, go to swanbitcoin.com/Max for Max. Or if you want to join the swanbitcoin.com/Stacy, STACY, go visit them. They're sponsoring our podcast. And, I think it's going to lead them to really cool stuff because I think you're going to see some more, transcripts. You're going to see more, short viral bits of our show because right now we don't have any of that sort of content for,
This is how the swan neck goes. This is the official swan neck. You've heard the term, oh, you're swanning. Why are you swanning around the corner? Yeah, this is what a swan neck looks like. So, when you're doing this smash buy, you got to go like, whoa, I got the swan neck. It's a black swan. It's a white swan. It's a flock of swans. It's a flock of seagulls.
Right. And I'm just going to make sure that Max has his mic a little bit away from his face so it's not too close and overmodulated.
No.
Because there are people who yell at me online for that. But
what the hell with those people?
So the theme of today's episode is the Grapes of Gatsby. Max and I were talking this week about how amazing the stock markets are booming, all-time highs, up, 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 up. Tesla up 700% this year. Bitcoin up 300%, close to 300% from its low. So there's the boom times, but at the same time, you're having great economic depression, like not great, but great as in like old Great Depression sort of stuff. You're having food lines. You're seeing tens of thousands of people lining up for cars. It's a horrible situation, but where we are providing the context and the content for, describing this, not only did we speak to Chris Arnott, who showed you in his book Dignity, the situation for many Americans, and that was before the pandemic. So here we are post-pandemic, where trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in the Cantillon effect are being created, being poured into the stock markets, being poured to the very wealthiest, consolidating power over our economy. Well, I mean, that's why we Bitcoin. Okay. That's why we Bitcoin, because Bitcoin fixes that. It does fix that. The Grapes of Gatsby is, an allusion back to those days where you had the Great Gatsby days and then the Great Depression days that were covered in the Grapes of Wrath.
Behave. Yeah, the Grapes of Gatsby. I think I'd love to write a poem about that. It's a combination of the Great Depression and the great Roaring 20s, because it's the 1920s again, except 100 years later. We got the new Roaring 20s. We got the new Grapes of Wrath. We got the new who was his name? William Job.
Job, Joab, right? Or is it Joad? But
it was the Dust Bowl.
We often talk about things we don't know. But the fact
I
is,
intuit them. I tease them out in my subconscious. They're there, and I let them flower. I don't step on it. I don't step on my own mind. I let it flower right in real time and see what the garden is producing. That's where love comes from. That's where it comes from. We're hodl love hodl.
Right. So I guess that rant is over. But I want to say, so we're going to talk about the Grapes of Gatsby.
Behave.
Max needs to learn how to behave. The Grapes of Gatsby, because here's a headline from the Washington Post: stocks oddly buoyant as virus batters U.S. economy. Because remember, we had the Roaring 20s and all that you remember from that, from footage and literature. But the market crash of 1929, it wiped out fortunes. It wiped out Wall Street. It wiped out many of the wealthy and their fortunes. So the wealth and income gap did close, right? Today we have it expanding. It's expanded hugely since 2020. With Jeff Bezos, I think he's increased his wealth by something like $80 billion. His wife increased her wealth by $60 billion, his ex-wife.
Yeah, but why do they use the word oddly?
Yeah, well, that's because they're mainstream media and they are stuck in the fiat world. So they only see the world through fiat means, and they are the elite, and they're friends with Paul Krugman, they're friends with Jay Powell, they're friends with Janet Yellen, they're friends with Jamie Dimon, they're friends with Lloyd Blankfein.
Yeah, but it's been going on for 40 years, though. It's like this has been going on for 40 years. And so that would be, what would be odd is if something different happened. Like it would be like, suddenly, all the money printing stopped causing this wealth and income gap, oddly. That would be the correct usage of the word oddly. But you can't use the word oddly to describe something that happens every month for 40 years. That's not odd. That's commonplace. These people don't know how to write a sentence.
Well, they start off the article in the Washington Post by David J. Lynch. It takes more than mass death and suffering to throw Wall Street off stride. The coronavirus may be killing 3,000 Americans each day while lawmakers bicker over how to help the wounded U.S. economy. Yet stock prices keep powering higher. By one measure, shares are more expensive relative to earnings than they were on the eve of the 1929 crash. And exactly, you're right. I mean, they keep on saying oddly. So we're going to show you another chart. We can't figure this out. We don't know why we're getting rich. The journalist there is probably getting rich. His stock portfolio is going up. All his friends' stock portfolios are going up. Property prices in Washington, D.C., of course, are also soaring. So they're all, feeling really good. Well, this chart highlights one main driver behind the Bitcoin rally: rising central bank balance sheets. Bitcoin has traded in tandem with combined balance sheets of Fed, Bank of Japan and the ECB. And you see that this is the March crash during the initial pandemic days. And Bitcoin also dropped then, but everything has soared since then. And it's going lockstep with
and they call that the taper tantrum. Every time they try to downsize the balance sheet of the central banks, markets sell off and they come back with 2, 3, 4x the amount of money printing and quote unquote stimulus. So that's not odd. That's not unusual. That's not aberrant behavior. That's the policy. Remember going back to 2008, they wanted to bail out the subprime borrowers. And some people said, wait a minute, that's moral hazard. You got to let the bad banks go under so that we don't allow them to take over and create a bad economy. And then the stock market crashed. And Timothy Geithner went before Congress and said basically the subtext, and what he said in the back rooms, we now know from his history, was that if you don't give me $1 trillion today, I'm going to crash this economy down to zero. So Congress said, aye, aye, Captain, where do I send the check? So it's extortion, right? It's extortion using the central bank as a means of extortion. And that's not the odd man out. That's the common policy at the Bank of England, Federal Reserve Bank, European Central Bank, Bank of Tokyo, every frickin' day. It's commonplace. So don't use the word odd, because that's the wrong use of that word, you illiterate idiot.
Right. So again, going back to that chart, Bitcoin is rising along with the central bank balance sheet. The central banks are putting more and more onto their balance sheet. And this is why we have the cantillionaires like expanding their wealth by extreme amounts. I also want to say that in 2021, what you're going to see is, because they haven't done it yet, but you are going to see the CMBS, the commercial mortgage-backed securities, and that's a huge market. Trillions of dollars of commercial mortgages, like this, the malls, retail sector, the commercial, all those office space in San Francisco that was built leading up to work from home era. Well, all of those are in default. They're going to blow up, and what are they going to do? Well, they're not going to let the rich and wealthy people of the cantillionaire class hold on to that bad debt. They're going to shift it right onto the Fed's balance sheet, and what that means is, as we see, this is why you have those cantillionaires. That's why you have Sten Druckenmiller. That's why you have BlackRock. That's why you have Guggenheim now. They're all coming out onto the Bloomberg News. This is a Bloomberg chart. They're coming out onto Bloomberg News, and what they're saying is that Bitcoin's going to 300,000. That's what Citibank said. And then Guggenheim comes out and says, no, it's going to 400,000. And then somebody else from another institutional investor sort of outfit comes on and says, oh, Guggenheim, they're lowballing it. It's not going to be 400,000. It's going to go to 1 million. So why these guys know all the CMBS are going to go onto the balance sheet of the Fed, and therefore you.
10 years ago, 15 years ago, that headline would say, as balance sheet expands on central banks, gold keeps going higher.
Yeah.
Because there used to be a direct connection. Gold used to follow indebtedness, and that chart was lockstep for decades. Then around 10 years ago, the debt kept going higher and gold went flat because the powers that be decided, you know what, we got to stop gold right now. And now, through the public records and through lawsuits, we know that the primary culprit was J.P. Morgan, who was caught now manipulating the price of gold on behalf of the money printers, and they paid a small fine as usual. What they can't control is Bitcoin. So now the headline is Bitcoin's going up with all this debt. And now in 2020, 2021, the penny has dropped. The realization is that, wait a minute, the call went out 6 months ago to Wall Street, stop the rise of Bitcoin. And guys like Michael Saylor over at MicroStrategy said, you know what? I've been waiting for this my whole life. You guys are in so much trouble. Not only am I not going to help you stop the rise of Bitcoin, I'm going to borrow at your ridiculously cheap rates that you use to bail out these banks, and I'm going to buy Bitcoin. And he's bought like $1 billion worth. And now Paul Tudor Jones has come in, Stan Druckenmiller coming in, like in 1992 when Soros broke the Bank of England with a speculative attack, and the pound jumped out of the European exchange rate mechanism, right? All these smart billionaire dudes are saying, ha, 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 Fed, We got you by the short and curlies. We're going to take all the money you print and we're going to buy Bitcoin. And that's how you get to $400,000. And that's how the Federal Reserve goes out of business. And that's why Bitcoin is a human rights issue. The freedom, emancipation from the paper money slavery is coming in 2021.
Right. And again, the Grapes of Gatsby, the thing about this sort of roaring 20s, it is a roaring sort of 20s time for the top 0.1%, as you see, just from and to be
Keep
fair,
going. I'll be right back. Keep going.
To be fair, Bezos and his wife are like entrepreneurs. They did an amazing job with Amazon. But the thing is that their wealth is increasing so rapidly by billions a week, just from money printing, just from the money pouring into the Fed. But the cost is, as we always talk about, is moral hazard, because we have a system whereby everything is the losers are rewarded over and over. And you could see that in this chart here, by the way. The worse the company, the better the stock has done, which makes the situation so tempting for short sellers. The most shorted stocks are up 191% since the March bottom. Shorting stocks in 2020 is like playing a video game on expert mode. So, we used to have a thing called the bond vigilantes until the Fed killed those people. Now, there were in the stock market, you had short sellers that would try to bring some honesty to price discovery. And if the person was running the company very badly, they would punish the CEO and all the shareholders for not doing something to make sure that the CEO is running the company better.
Enron.
Yeah. So now the short sellers are also being slaughtered by the Fed. So these are the checks and balances of a free market system. In government, you have the checks and balances of the courts and the legislative body and the executive body, and they're also checks and balances against each other. But here, the short sellers are the last to get annihilated. They used to do that, remember in 2008 crash, or that was the most recent where they just banned short selling.
The Big Short. The 2008, you had that movie made, The Big Short, and it was documented by that excellent financial writer. And but that short sales, as you point out, like the bond vigilantes, have been taken out of the equation by those who would prefer not to have short selling and would prefer to see themselves become insta-billionaires.
Because we have honest money with Bitcoin. They don't want honest money.
Yeah.
It started with dishonest money.
Look what I got. I got my orange slippers.
That's Max's Christmas present. I think people could see that. They
Put them on your feet. Slippers.
Put them on your feet.
These are my new orange slippers.
Speaking of the Grapes of Gatsby, you're looking like Gatsby with your orange sparkly shoes.
I got my orange slippers. I click the heels 3 times and it takes me to Michael Saylor's house. Look at that.
Well, I click my shoes, and you know what it takes me to is the smash buy on swanbitcoin.com, who is our sponsor.
I'm doing yoga now. See that? I got my yoga pose.
Well, again, my slippers, I click them 3 times and it takes me to swanbitcoin.com/Stacy, and I smash buy. The smash buys have been a huge success. There's a huge volume now going on swanbitcoin.com because people could smash buy, instant buy.
They did $1 million in the first 5 minutes, and that was just me.
That was Max on our live stream the other day.
Yeah.
And he's been I have to say he's been going a little bit crazy, and that's even without his sparkly orange shoes.
I got my orange slippers. I click my heel 3 times, and I'm at the Citadel party with Michael Saylor.
Well, I think Michael Saylor is actually small time now compared to those on swanbitcoin.com, because I think, that's where all the OGs are, because they've got attitude. They've got, knowledge.
What I was thinking about?
They've got
something.
Orange pill.
I got a profound insight.
Okay, tell it to the audience. Tell it to me. Tell it to them.
I want to
tell
discuss
it
it with you.
Go ahead.
I just thought of it recently, in the last 20 minutes, because I'm in Twitter and people are like, oh, I wish I bought Bitcoin, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is this, that going into 2021, the paper money system is going to collapse. And if you have any Bitcoin wealth at all, it'll make all the difference. So the relative Bitcoin wealth won't be that important. It won't matter if there's a guy with 12 billion and one guy's got, let's say, 100 or 200,000 worth of Bitcoin, because we're in a really apocalyptic post-fiat money environment where having any Bitcoin wealth at all will make just a huge difference. So I think people should just get out of this idea that that the way people look at wealth in a post fiat money world is going to be anything similar to the way we look at it now in the fiat money world. Because the fiat money world, everyone looks at that Forbes 400 list, and they look at the rich list, and they think that that has impact. But in a post fiat money world, anybody with really any Bitcoin at all is all going to be part of the same post fiat money apocalyptic world. That's what the orange pill is all about. Because orange pill, as you say, somebody with one satoshi can't make it. It is equally powerful as like a Michael Saylor or a Stan Druckenmiller, right? The power equation is going to be flattened in a post fiat money world, and you can't print your way to success, right? So that's why it just stack sats now. Swan Bitcoin, even if you put $10 here, $10 there, once the fiat money collapses, you're going to be you're going to be on that arc floating above the apocalypse with your Bitcoin, and the ark had elephants, but it also had little squirrels, but they were all on the ark, right? And they all were like, hey man, what's happening on the ark? They're not drowning in the flood of fiat money, right? So I just think the whole notion of wealth is going to be radically changed at the post fiat money bitpocalypse.
Yeah, I think that's really important to stress in this Grapes of Gatsby time, because on swellbitcoin.com, you could dollar cost average $5 a week or $5,000 a week, or you could smash by $100 or you could smash by $5,000, and it doesn't matter. You're still part of the Orange Pill gang, and that is important, because look at the Grapes of Gatsby world that we started talking about. Here's Jeff Bezos. Is he taking more risk? Is he innovating right now? Is he doing anything exceptional to like make 90 billion a year now, and his wife 60 billion a year? Probably not. I mean, it's the government that shut down the rest of his competitors, so he gets to keep going. And we don't have that world in Bitcoin, and I think that's important to remember. And I think Michael Saylor is great, and it's cool that he's part of all these memes, but let's get RDBTC to make a meme for the little guys.
Right on, RDBTC. He makes lots of memes. He's a meme factory over there. And the memes are the currency of awareness, and Bitcoin runs on awareness. The more people who are aware of it, the harder the money becomes. And once you recognize it, you can't help but be aware of it. And once you're aware of it, you can't help but be mesmerized by it. And once you're mesmerized by it, you can't help but be totally transformed about it. And once you're transformed, you go down the path of transmogrification, and you accept the Satoshi's Eucharist, and the bits of Bitcoin are the body and soul of Satoshi, not an abstraction, but the real thing. Because you own your private keys, right? I mean, look, in Christianity, you're supposed to, if you accept, Christ into your life, he's actually in your life. The Eucharist is the actual bone and the actual blood of Christ. With Bitcoin, if you own your private keys, that's the Eucharist. You actually own a piece of Satoshi. It's not an intermediary. You're not going through some intermediary. You have Satoshi in you. It's the Eucharist of Bitcoin. And, it transforms the way you think, transforms the way you act, transforms the way you behave, transforms your life.
Well, speaking of transforming lives, we're going to throw to our guest now, Alex Gladstein, who works tirelessly to spread the message of Satoshi as a means of liberation and delivering human rights to people all over the world, including outside of America, where, people might need more rescue than but I actually think, we'll go into it afterward, but I think like Americans need more rescue than anything, because, your state of mind is the most important, really.
Yeah. The 51st state, the state of mind.
Right. Max, we've been waiting to interview this guest for years now. We're always on the road, always traveling, and the pandemic has locked us down at home. So we have the opportunity now to sit down, book this, and speak to Alex Gladstein. Welcome to Orange Pill.
I'm happy to be here. It's a good day for Bitcoin. It's a good day for freedom. It's a bad day for authoritarianism.
Well, that's a good point. So let's talk about that, because you work with the Human Rights Foundation. And
yes.
Why is Bitcoin related to human rights?
Can I share a quick image with you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So it is a Trojan horse. And picture the guardians of the city opening the gate and looking at the Trojan horse. The guardians of the city gate are the dictators, and they are the people who control society. and they're looking at this big Trojan horse, and the Trojan horse is Bitcoin. And they're like, this is awesome. Let's get this thing in here. What they don't realize is inside the belly of the Trojan horse is freedom. So for me, Bitcoin represents freedom in many ways because it's kind of like a virus. It's something that can only spread. It's a genie that can't go back in the bottle. And when I've been looking at how, especially authoritarian leaders around the world who are enemies of the United States, have been sort of turning to Bitcoin in different ways, what they don't realize is that the staffers, the employees, the bureaucrats that they assign to steal Bitcoin, like, for example, North Korea hacks South Korean cryptocurrency exchanges, steals Bitcoin, they sell it in China. Similar things have happened in Venezuela, Iran, etc. What they don't realize is that Bitcoin is like this mind virus, and the people that the regime has assigned to carry out these tasks are learning about this money that the government doesn't control, and they're going to use it too. And over time, that's going to erode the power of the authoritarian state, and it's going to shift the balance back towards the people. And that's something that's very powerful. And I think it's something that inspires me. And it's something that obviously will play out over many, many decades, perhaps over hundreds of years. But this is how I wanted to start off the conversation, with this concept of Bitcoin as a Trojan horse against arbitrary power.
Right. So, Alex, I mean, you work in the area of human rights, and human rights people and workers, and have been searching for something to liberate folks for many, many years. And the way human rights organizations are organized, they're very bureaucratic, they're very top heavy a lot of times, and it's difficult to be effective. And the way you're describing Bitcoin here, it sounds like an elixir. It sounds like something that you in your best imaginative dreams would have dreamed of being available. And is that too far a characterization, or do you see it in this type of really almost a silver bullet kind of way?
Well, nothing's a silver bullet, but inarguably, people in history wished they could have had Bitcoin. I have family that survived the Holocaust, and most of these folks, when they escaped, they left with nothing. They could only bring the clothes on their back as they fled fascism. And today in Venezuela, people fleeing a similar kind of fascism are able to actually convert their time and energy and families' holdings into a digital format and leave and go start a new life somewhere else. So the opportunities for individuals in the face of arbitrary power, I think, are forever changed. And nothing's a silver bullet, but this thing is a powerful tool that tons of people have already used to great benefit, in a situation where they are the David versus the Goliath. And such a small number of people, comparatively have learned about this thing, that I think the future is very bright in many ways. I mean, if you think about the fact that, to our best estimates, 70, 80 million, maybe 90 million people have used Bitcoin, and the world's got 7.5 billion. So we're at about 1%. I mean, think about what could happen 15, 20, 30%. So I think that for all of these reasons, Bitcoin is the real deal. Nothing's perfect. Nothing's going to solve all of our problems. Bitcoin does not fix this, but it is a really amazing tool. And I would compare it to encrypted messaging, in the same way that dissidents and activists and journalists and whistleblowers use things like Signal to communicate in a way that no government can see. Bitcoin is a corollary. I mean, this is a way where we can have a parallel financial system, a parallel economy that they can't control. I mean, they can do their best to threaten us, and they will. And I've been debating that all week with people about, will Wall Street and the US government co-opt Bitcoin? And I think they'll try, but it's tough to stop unstoppable code.
I want to follow up on that because that's quite interesting. I am going to get up onto those the pieces you've been doing about will Wall Street co-opt Bitcoin, but there's been something really fascinating in our Orange Pill Telegram groups over the past few weeks or months, and that is a huge amount of Cubans that are joining our group. And the thing that's happened is we make another show called Kaiser Report that gets dubbed into Spanish, and we've been covering Bitcoin since 2011. So we've been very early on there, and the show is dubbed into Spanish. But in Cuba, they've just been able to start watching this on their television sets there for the past, I guess within the past year. So 2020 is a year that they've been enlightened. And So there are like an enormous numbers of Cubans in our group talking about Bitcoin. And apparently there's a huge Cuban community now in Cuba. So I'm asking you,
Mhm.
like Cuba, Bitcoin seems to be like the new asylum. Remember back in the days of the Soviet Union and the Cold War, like dissidents had to try to make it to the U.S. embassy to jump over the wall and get and declare asylum, or find some way, at one of these cultural exchanges to break off and go declare asylum.
Right.
And with Cuba, we've had that, but we've also had sanctions and all sorts of stuff. And it seems so bizarre to watch, like, as Americans, especially this relationship with Cuba, to see all these Cubans suddenly getting Bitcoin and just being liberated in the mind rather than, say,
Right.
the money.
Yeah. I mean, this is seeking asylum in cyberspace.
Yes.
I mean, it really goes back to the cypherpunks and what they dreamed about. And it is being realized in a small way. And it's quite profound. I mean, the first job I ever had at the Human Rights Foundation as a summer intern was to help put together backpacks of books and movies that were either Spanish to begin with, in the Spanish language, or dubbed. And they would go in on DVDs. And my Latin American colleagues, who I couldn't freely travel to Cuba without, a lot of government permissions, et cetera, because this was back in 2007. But my Latin American colleagues who were Argentine or Mexican, they could easily travel to Cuba. So they would go with these backpacks and they would go to what were called the underground libraries, because books in Cuba were banned by the government except for the ones that the government approved. So small groups of people would gather in units of 3 to 4 people at their homes, and they would privately read books, watch movies, and have discussion groups. This era has ended because now there's more internet access in Cuba, and people use something called the paquete system, where some folks have been able to get satellite devices in, and they kind of download the equivalent of Cuban Netflix, everything they want from the internet, and they distribute it around among the neighborhoods. But back then there was none of this penetration, and the stuff we would send was in very high demand. So we sent in things like V for Vendetta, Animal Farm, et cetera, all into Spanish. And I realized through that work that information is power in many ways. And throughout the rest of my career, I've spent a lot of time working with North Korean refugees who've escaped North Korea, doing similar things, where we have this program called Flash Drives for Freedom, where we collect flash drives and donate them to South Koreans, who load them up with mainly K-pop and South Korean stuff. And they send it into North Korea, where people can get a glimpse of the outside world. And all through this line of work, I realized again that information is power, and Bitcoin is like the next level to that. I mean, Bitcoin is like taking it to another level, because information is one thing, but money is as you all know and talk about, is entirely another.
Right. I'm intrigued by your comment there about governments who are threatened by Bitcoin. They get some people working on it, and then those people get converted to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is acting as a bit of a fifth column in these nations, and helping to convert people to Bitcoiners. When you were talking there, kind of the image that came to my mind was that game of Go. You know that game of Go? It's an Asian game,
Mm-hmm.
and the object is to turn all the pieces to your color on the board. One's
Right.
black, one's white, and then you're playing this game, and you're trying to flip over the colors. And it seems almost like Bitcoin is like this wave. It's an intellectual wave. It's a wave that hits people's minds, and when they get it, they cannot unget it. They can't unsee
Correct.
what they just saw. And that it's winning this game of global cyber Go.
Yeah, and it's also been interesting over the last 4 years, especially as I've been awakened. I first was introduced to Bitcoin by folks working with Ukrainian activists in 2013. This was before the Maidan Square revolution. And they were saying that maybe Bitcoin could be a better way to get funding to groups in Ukraine at that time. But we didn't really take it that seriously. We didn't dive in too deeply. But a year later, we started to receive donations in Bitcoin. Some of our donors were like, we want to donate in Bitcoin. So that was cool. So we started to incorporate it slowly into our work. And by 2017, we actually had programs connecting activists to people in the Bitcoin community. And what I've discovered through all of that is that people from authoritarian societies with weak currencies understand Bitcoin much more quickly than people from London or Tokyo or New York. And they're much more open-minded about it. And when you go to somebody in New York and you say, hey, here's money the government doesn't control, they're like, what are you, crazy? When you talk to somebody from Harare about this, they're like, oh, let's sit down. Tell me more. I'm very interested. So it hints at or depicts this bifurcation in the world between the haves and the have-nots in a way, or at least the people who live with the privilege of the dollar system or the euro system or the yen system versus those who live under regimes where the currency is debased in a much more frequent way that has been totally normalized, and where the governments steal from the population in a much more brazen way. So I think this is one of the reasons why you see the interest from the Cubans, the interest from Nigerians, the interest from Venezuelans, the interest from Chinese, et cetera. It's almost like the momentum and the capital of Bitcoin, is not in San Francisco. It's not in Paris. It's not in Berlin. It's out in Lagos. It's in Caracas. It's in Moscow.
Right. In Nigeria, there's something like 30% of the population is already in, quote, hyper Bitcoinization. They've already adopted it. They are using it on a daily basis, and they've leapfrogged all the banking infrastructure. And they are kind of getting away from all the problems that have plagued Africa for hundreds of years, actually, in a big way. And so that's an interesting use case. And like, I think as you point out, in the US and these other countries could be the last to really get Bitcoin because they're the beneficiaries of the current system.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure about that data from Nigeria, but certainly a growing number of people are using Bitcoin. I was in a conversation with Ben Hunt the other day, and I argued that it's possible that you might see, again, communist Cuba having a higher Bitcoin usage and awareness than capitalist America already, perhaps per capita. And it's just ironic that the EU and the United States, particularly, which are supposed to be the land of the free, are actually the governments and jurisdictions which may have the most restrictive financial policies. And that is really bad for those societies. And, it's going to cause a brain drain effect. And a lot of smart people who want to work in this space and who are attracted to the future of money may have to go elsewhere. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin. You could just go somewhere else. Hey, you don't like what's happening in France? You can move to Thailand, or you can move to Taiwan or Japan or somewhere else, right? And I think we're going to start to really wrestle with this. In free societies, there is still a chance to fight. So, for example, right now we're worried about like some sort of restriction on self-hosting, right, in the United States with Bitcoin, that it could happen momentarily, right? Really, in the next week, who knows? Stuff like that can be fought. I mean, there are people who will sue the government. There will be courts. There will be appeals, and maybe a new administration will reverse previous administration's orders. That's not going to happen in Saudi Arabia or Cuba or China. Like, the people have no power. They can't like push back. So it is, in my view, a responsibility of people out here in freer societies where we do have things like property rights, where we can sue the government, where we can write op-eds, where we can do what you and I are, what the three of us are doing right now without being afraid. Like, none of us are afraid right now. There are people who would be afraid to do what we're doing right now in many countries. We have almost like this privilege or this opportunity to work on this stuff and improve it for everybody else. And I think, again, another good corollary is with encrypted messaging. If you think about someone like Moxie Marlinspike, he created Signal in many ways. He was, it was his brainchild. And he was able to do that from the United States, right? And largely Signal as an organization has not had any trouble with the US government. It would not be possible for Signal to have been created in China, right? It just wouldn't have been possible. He would have been arrested. So again, we have this opportunity to do the innovation in some of these countries and fight back. And it's kind of something that I think people should talk more about. I mean, we can push back, others can't. So let's give it a shot at least, And
I do want to point out at this moment that, of course, the entire field of cryptography, many Americans in Silicon Valley, cryptographers there, faced a huge challenge getting cryptography out to the world. It was considered a national security issue, and they did risk prison, some of those early the cypherpunks. So we must credit them. But you follow the history of these sort of dissidents. I mean, you can consider those cypherpunks dissidents at that point because they were definitely going up against the national security state. But in this situation with Cuba, so I mean, you should join the group. The Spanish language group is just filled with it. It's like 1,000 people, and at least half of them are Cubans. But then they're also in our English language group, and there is kind of because it's been with me my entire life. This whole situation with Cuba, like I kind of worry about them. Like I don't want them to get in trouble. Being in this group and talking about Bitcoin. What do you say to that?
Well, I think indifference is never an option, and I believe that it's more dangerous to do nothing than it is to do something. And this I have learned through my work with the North Koreans, because everybody says, oh, isn't that dangerous sending information into North Korea? Because if someone gets caught with it, they could get executed. And you have to consider that the people who are picking these things up or buying these things in the market are adults. They're making their own decisions. And at the end of the day, one day when North Korea is a free country, those people, as they come out of there, as they stream out of there, they will be so grateful for anyone who tried to help them. And they won't look very fondly upon people who did nothing. Let's put it that way. So we can go back to the Soviets and think about when dissidents were distributing pamphlets in Mayakovsky Square. And, were the people who were distributing poems, which were illegal, were they dangerous or were they noble? I would argue they're quite noble. And just to pick up on what you mentioned earlier, I think it's important to draw that distinction between the cypherpunks who are doing this kind of work and their equivalents inside authoritarian regimes. Because if you think about people like Whit Diffie, or if you think about people like Phil Zimmerman, they're free people today. They're not in prison. Their works have been celebrated. They went on to run companies, make a lot of money, and they directly challenged the government, and they won. Their equivalents are people like Liu Xiaobo in China, who were arrested by secret police, put in prison, and eventually killed or died. So I just want to go back to this. We have this responsibility because we have the opportunity. Now, it doesn't always work. We have Snowden, etc. It doesn't always work. But we also have Diffie and we have Zimmerman, and China has none of those, right? So there is a risk worth taking here, where we can actually build the Bitcoin protocol in a way that can bend it more towards privacy, decentralization, resilience, access, where it can help everybody. And I think that's super, super important for everybody to get involved with in the next year or two. I mean, we're not talking in the distance. We're talking restrictions that are going to come now, right? Especially in the first 100 days of the next administration. So the more that people can get involved now to build out Bitcoin and make it more resilient, the better.
So, Alex, when you're in the human rights business, if you can call it that, and so you're out there around the world. You're in spots where there's a lot of human rights abuses. You're talking to people to liberate people. Now, how do you sell Bitcoin to these people? Because first of all, for a long time, of course, there was this idea that the way toward human rights is through democracy, spreading democracy. And we hear that all the time in the U.S. The U.S. is trying to spread democracy, and that this is akin to spreading human rights. And we know that that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of strings attached, and there's some agendas. All righty. Yeah. So now we get to Bitcoin, and you're saying, hey, Bitcoin it separates state from money, which is great. That's like the first thing you said. But how do you pitch it to people who might not know it? And the reason I ask this is because Bitcoin is, people have been in Bitcoin for years and years, still don't really know how to talk about it. And now you're talking to somebody around the world, halfway across the world, and it's a human rights issue. How do you pitch it? How do you talk to them about it? If I'm pretend I'm a guy you're talking to about it for the first time in terms of the context of human rights, what would you tell me?
Yeah. And just before I dive into that, I'll make a comment about the democracy promotion. That's something that Bitcoin maybe has an advantage over democracy in terms of democracy promotion is a buzzword. And obviously, as you pointed out, can be quite meaningless and vacuous, and has been used to further the agenda of the United States and other nations over the last several decades to a lot of death and destruction. Now, there are a lot of people doing democracy work that are awesome people that truly want to help people push back against dictatorship. But it's a mixed bag. When it comes to informing people about Bitcoin or teaching them that it exists, it's very different. I mean, it's Bitcoin or bust. There's no way to wrap it up in, some marketing buzzword and there's no way that democracy, in the way that democracy promotion can just be an invasion. I mean, what are you going to do with Bitcoin? It by its very nature is this peaceful thing. So it is arguably a much more interesting thing to promote than the concept of democracy. And arguably, I personally believe that democracy is a universal concept, that no one wants to be ruled under the boot of a thug, right? But, people have their opinions and they say, oh, maybe this one country isn't right for democracy. And I disagree, but that's a debate. With Bitcoin, there is no debate. It's one protocol for everybody. It doesn't discriminate, right? So again, it's a very different thing that you can promote. And I do think it opens itself up to being something that more and more people might be involved in. Again, in the same way that encrypted messaging is easier to promote than the concept of democracy, because it is simply code. Now, when it comes to what would I say to somebody, I mean, I've done it many times, but I think that generally speaking, I just ask if they've heard of it. And usually the answer is no. Or it's, I read an article about it once or whatever. Maybe their interpretation of Bitcoin is not that different from the average person in America. Like they may have heard of it, but generally speaking, unlikely that they've gotten involved. And I say, well, what if I were to tell you that this is money that the government doesn't control and that I can send you Bitcoin from my house in America, and minutes later you can receive it on your phone without asking permission from anybody, and you can find someone else and you can sell it into local currency, and you can do this all in under an hour and without permission from the government. Do you want to learn more? And the answer is, of course, yes, please tell me more. And in my work, what I'm interested in doing is helping civil society organizations, media outlets, journalists, pro-democracy activists in these different countries understand that they can raise money through Bitcoin in a way that they can't raise fiat. Because in these countries, whether it's Nigeria or Belarus, the government, when it's under threat, it surveils and then shuts down the financial system in a selective way to prevent challengers. So both in Belarus and Nigeria right now, there's like popular opposition to the regime, right? And people are protesting. And the government has been closing the bank accounts of people who are protesting. Well, guess what? Obviously, they can't close Bitcoin accounts. So in both cases, we've been behind the scenes sort of trying to help people understand that they can both get money into these countries to support protesters through Bitcoin, and also that like these organizations can raise the money in a safer way. For example, when we were first introduced to what was happening in Nigeria in October, they were using a single address. Okay. So this obviously, as we know, is not that safe. I mean, the Nigerian government could look and figure out what's going on. So we recommended that they get BTC Pay server up and running. So for a while there, they had a kick-ass site, which Jack Dorsey even shared, where it was a really slick looking BTC Pay server instance that they ran themselves. And obviously that protected the privacy of the donors because it generates a new address every time. You don't know what's going on if you're an outside observer. So we can make a material difference by recommending different technology that we know about. And I think it's worth doing.
Right. I want to follow up on that because, the US is famously not actually a democracy. It's a republic, right? And I think the Bitcoin protocol is the purest of republics, right? There is no one single powerful voice. Somebody like Michael Saylor, yes, he could be one of the biggest owners of Bitcoin in the world, but as the user activated soft fork proved, it doesn't matter. Like it's the users of Bitcoin that control
Correct.
it. And that's quite unique in that Bitcoin provides the institutions that are often lacking when we do like interfere or whatever, when a dictator is overthrown, like Mubarak, when he was overthrown, there were no institutions there to provide a way to build on that society there. And we were there right after Mubarak was overthrown, like a week later. And people were in such state of elation. They were so happy. You could see the freedom in their faces. But obviously it's now back to like Sisi. So, partly because there were no institutions and they didn't have.
They have a saying for what you're describing. And it's what grows in the desert? Scorpions. Under the boot of a dictator in Egypt or Syria, they don't allow civil society to flourish.
Yeah.
So when the dictator leaves, all you have are the scorpions. So of course the Islamists came into power, and now we end up with Sisi. So I do sort of agree with what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be the problem that I see, whether it's Syria or Yemen or Libya or Iraq. You see that there were no institutions there, and then you just get plunder, especially if it's somewhere like Iraq or the Soviet Union. When those were people ready for a full democracy, exactly like America, and then what happened? Like, it was total plunder. Like it was chaos and plunder. So it just feels like Bitcoin is kind of, like you said, a life raft. It is a digital asylum. It is a way for some sort of order within the chaos of everybody participating, greed and wanting more and speculating and whatever. It's just stable. It's every 10 minutes there's a new block, and that's, there's an order to it.
I mean, I think it's a peaceful revolution.
Yes.
Is the best way I would say it. And it's happening. And people don't realize it. I mean, we're already talking today. I have a friend who I co-wrote this little book called The Little Bitcoin Book with a bunch of Bitcoiners from different countries around the world, from Venezuela, Nigeria, Philippines. The Filipino friend of mine, Luis, pointed out today that about 6 hours ago, the peso reached 1 million per Bitcoin precisely. And the centavo, which is the smallest denomination of the peso, reached 100 million per Bitcoin. So the Philippines has achieved satoshi equivalence, which is remarkable. But it isn't even the first. This is a massive country, by the way, with a lot of importance and tens of millions of people. It isn't even the first big country to reach satoshi equivalence. So people in America are like so freaking clueless about Bitcoin, and meanwhile, it's out there toppling fiat currencies. I mean, it's really amazing.
That's incredible.
That is a fantastic way to say it. But let's follow up on that, because I thought one of the most remarkable things during the U.S. election was when the IMF used that as an opportunity to say they want a new Bretton Woods. And you're like, whoa, that's pretty remarkable.
Well,
do Americans know what's coming?
Well, this is a great point. And I have been doing a lot of work and study in this area of monetary history just to learn more, just because I'm so fascinated. But really, I mean, there's a lot of people who do believe that money has always been a government creation. And these folks, whether you want to call them chartalists or whatever, they're going to be very interested in having another Bretton Woods and in trying to set up the money system for the future, and in a handful of people getting together to figure out what everybody's going to use for money. And that's literally what's happened to us over the last 100 years, right? It's been a sort of social engineering experiment on a global scale. And I'm willing to bet that in the same way that we currently look back at tyranny and kings as an outdated concept that was tremendously unfair, or the feudal system, for example, in the way that we kind of look at that and say, oh my God, that's, I can't believe everybody used to live under that. Today, a lot of people have escaped that. I'm willing to bet that we'll look back in 100 years at today and say, I can't believe a handful of people used to have all the monetary power. That's so crazy. And to me, Bitcoin is that thing, like democratic governance and the printing press and the internet, that can help us get there. And that gives me, again, a lot of hope. But, we're talking a long road here. We're talking a very, very, very long sloping road to justice.
Yeah, I got two quick questions. So First one is, for years now, we've heard that the miracle of the global economy was lifting millions and billions out of poverty. And it seems like we're reversing that a lot. Now I'm asking because you're in the human rights front line, so you would see a lot of what's going on here, because it seemed like this being pulled out of poverty was based on this fiat money system, and it was a bit illusory. And now that this fiat money system is collapsing and kind of the Ponzi scheme is collapsing, it seems like the poverty levels are skyrocketing predictably because it's based on fiat money. Is that accurate? Is that true from what you see?
I know that the restrictions that governments have placed on their population in the name of fighting COVID have been very disastrous in a lot of countries. And, I'm not going to I don't really want to go into a debate about that particular, but let's just say that the situation is getting very grim. It already was very grim for a lot of people, but now their small businesses have been destroyed. Their livelihoods have been uprooted. Imports have been reduced. Tourism has been reduced. Exports have been reduced. I mean, it's tough out there in a lot of countries that don't have the US dollar, that don't have the US stock market, that can't just hop on their phone and invest in a slice of Apple stock. I mean, this is such a luxury, to live here in the United States. Really, no matter where you are on the socioeconomic ladder, like there are opportunities for you where there are not in similar castes in other countries. So those are people that are going to find their way to Bitcoin because it gives something that really we've never had before, which is equality of opportunity when it comes to money. I mean, again, yes, the billionaires and the governments and the corporations, they can buy a lot of Bitcoin. Great, go for it. But they can't change the rules. They can't print more than 21 million, and they can't prevent us from sending it to each other, and they can't prevent anyone from using the network. And that to me is like so revolutionary. I don't believe in equality of outcome. I think that's a myth, but I do believe in equality of opportunity. And I just think it's never really been possible before. There are things like the Constitution, the Bill of Rights that try to achieve it, right? And it's always a struggle, right? And there may be societies you'd point to that are like Norway, where maybe they've gotten pretty close, right? But really, at the end of the day, Bitcoin's like the real McCoy when it comes to equality of opportunity. I mean, it really is about as close as we're going to get.
So these groups in the United States, and let's look at the United States for a second, going back to Occupy Wall Street, that was obviously an awareness of how Wall Street was responsible for these wealth and income gaps, et cetera. And since then, we've had a lot of groups come to the fore. We've got Black Lives Matter. We've got many, many groups. Is it these groups, if they were to take on Bitcoin, it seems like that's a unifying concept for all these groups in the United States because it all goes back to a similar problem, yes or no?
Yeah, no, I think it's just a matter of time. In that eventually these organizations, these movements will get their bank account frozen for some reason, and it'll be a bureaucratic error. Oh, we're so sorry. But as soon as that starts to happen, there will be a need for Bitcoin. I mean, just as it's happened in Nigeria and Belarus. I do believe, again, as I've tried to make the case, that America is different. We do have property rights. We have ways to push back. We can write op-eds in the newspaper. We can have things like this without being afraid. But there are certain trends which seem inevitable. And one of them seems to be this like just increase in financial repression. I mean, dating back to 6102, dating back to the Bank Secrecy Act, and dating now with the travel rule. I mean, basically, as the money system has gone all digital, money's turned from a bearer asset to a mechanism of surveillance and control, and cash is disappearing. And I think people are going to miss cash, and they're going to forget how important it was. And that's why this quest for digital cash is so important for human rights. And we're going to need it just as much here in the United States as everywhere else. I just think it's a little more urgent elsewhere, and people are figuring it out sooner in terms of a use case. I mean, again, most people in the United States, EU, they think of Bitcoin as, majority, a speculative store of value, basically, as an investment, as a luxury. For Michael Saylor, for Raoul Pal, et cetera, Bitcoin's a luxury. I mean, that one guy lives in the Cayman Islands. I mean, what does he care? But for people out there, who don't have access to the Cayman Islands, who can't just go there and hang out, where they are subject to a fiat currency that is debased continuously, and they can't access the international system. They really, it's hard for them to get dollars. Maybe they live behind sanctions. It's not even their fault. I mean, think about Iranians. 70 million Iranians live under sanctions, and they're not even responsible for the evil acts of their government. They didn't get to vote. They don't live in a democracy. So they're sitting there. They can't use Apple products. They can't connect to the international economy, but Bitcoin gives them this way out, right? So I do think it's incredibly powerful what's happening. It is this peaceful revolution, but it's a very quiet one. And the media hates to acknowledge this. The media doesn't understand Bitcoin. And it really has made me very jaded because I normally, in other fields, let's say, I'm very pro-journalism. I love journalism. I love the art of journalism. I love investigative reporters. But they really have just missed it on Bitcoin. And obviously, you all have been charting this for a decade plus, how many times they've announced it dead, et cetera, et cetera. And good journalists who I respect don't get it. And it's just such a mystery to me. You know what I mean?
Right. And I guess we have to wrap it up. But, where would you send an American or a European who are in the lap of luxury relative to the rest of the world? Where do they go to stop this financial panopticon coming?
Yeah, well, in the United States, there are organizations that are out there trying to protect our digital rights. And you can look to Coin Center, you can look to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, you can look to the ACLU. I hope the latter two start to get more involved with Bitcoin and financial privacy and security in the next couple of years. or in the next couple weeks, hopefully. But there are things you can do. You can push back. If we get this restriction on self-hosted wallets in the next couple of days, you can push back. I mean, maybe you own an exchange. You can literally sue the government and take them to court over this. This is what the Electronic Frontier Foundation does over mass surveillance, right? They are an arm. They're known as like a liberties organization, but they're basically a big organization of 40, 50, 60 lawyers who all they do is sue the government for NSA violations of our rights, right? So there's the Freedom of the Press Foundation. There's all kinds of groups that you can support that are pushing back. And eventually all these organizations are going to understand that Bitcoin is like a key part of this. So there's stuff you can do today. If you want to learn more about what we're doing, you can come check us out at href.org. It was a lot of fun to be on with you all. And we're here for the Bitcoin Trojan horse. It's happening.
All right. I'm looking forward to suing the government. Let's do
that
it.
sounds like
Let's
a great
take
idea.
You guys should do it.
Orange pill to the Supreme Court.
I'm American, and that's the American pastime, litigation.
Hey, I mean, this Supreme Court may very well rule in the favor of free speech and property rights. You never know.
True. Well, thanks for being on Orange Pill.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It's the Swan Lake.
That segment was brought to you by swanbitcoin.com, where they have the lowest fees in Bitcoin, but they have the noisiest shoes. Where's your
those
shoes?
are noisy shoes. Where did the noise come from?
You rubbing this.
The sparkles are on it went friction. It's this little friction in the shoes.
Men don't know how to handle sparkles. So Max has sparkly shoes thanks to basically overdosing. Like he went freaking crazy on swanbitcoin.com, smash buying Lord knows how much money. I think we're bankrupt in the fiat world.
Yeah, Pierre Richard wouldn't be happy that I spent any money on shoes. I mean, I may be, dedicated, but the fact that I spent $7.95 on these shoes would really upset Pierre Richard.
Right. So those are Max's shoes. And again, our sponsor, we need to thank our sponsor because they've just come on board. And, you can help us thank our sponsor by visiting swanbitcoin.com/Max or /Stacy, STACY, because, the more you visit them and the more you, smash buy and dollar cost average, the more content they could deliver, do creative stuff with this. I'm
going to do a interpretation of Swan Lake with my Swan Bitcoin. Da, 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 dee, 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 dee. Wasn't that dramatic?
That was lovely. That was actually very, emotional. I'm going to turn your audio back up a little bit because, I was ready to cry. Max's mom worked in the whole opera industry, so you've got it in your blood. You've got orange sparkly shoes in your blood. This is the sort of place that it comes from.
Oh, heck yeah! My mom was got a full scholarship to Juilliard playing trumpet back in the 1940s, I believe it was.
Yeah, and our friend Madge Weinstein, the bloated lesbian who does content for us here. Yeah. She's big into opera. My God, she knows everything. And when I told her that your mom had worked with Kirsten Flagstad, she was like, whoa! Kirsten Flagstad was, it was actually more famous than Maria Callas, who's more recent. But Kirsten Flagstad was super famous. There's stories. If you go read her Wikipedia, here you have over the Christmas time to, spend time with your family, but also reading stuff online and learning and educating yourself. When she performed for the first time on radio live here in America, and this was during the Great Depression sort of days. Oh yeah. The radio network went down. Everybody tuned in. The entirety of America tuned in to hear this. She was 20 years old. She was very young, singing live. I forget. Well, she was famous for her Wagner. So she mastered that, right? She was the queen of that. Definitely. That must have been powerful times in hearing that on the radio. And
I think my interpretation of Swan Lake, though, was equal to anything Kristen Flagstaff may have done.
Well, we already know that Brecky is, chopping that up into an amazing viral meme sort of thing. I love that meme of us when we're doing like that.
I was on Amazon looking for glasses shaped like swans, but I found nothing. If anyone can help me find, I want to, I don't want to spend more than $3 on glasses that are shaped like Swan. I think Swan is also a brand of glasses, so that makes the situation difficult.
It's totally peer pressure, right? Pierre Rochard has basically turned Max into a miser because anytime
Max Kaiser the miser.
Yeah, Max has to like justify everything. He's like, honey, I only spent $4 on this. Don't worry. And I'm like, I don't want champagne that only costs $4.
I found a penny on the street the other day, and I immediately bought 100 sats with it.
No, I swear though, he's just like, don't tell Pierre Rochard.
It was face up, and that's good luck. I'm not above picking a penny up off the street,
no
especially
way.
if it's face up. Look, man, penny saved is a penny earned. A sat saved is a sat earned. That's what this country's made out of, savers. You think we're European spenders and European money printers? No, that's not America. America is about hard work and saving and thrift. Don't believe that nonsense about the paradox of thrift. That was written by Paul Krugman at the New York Times, a known financial terrorist. You got to save to create the capital. That's the basis of capitalism. There's no capitalism without capital, and there's no capital without savings, okay? If they're not going to pay us on our savings by keeping interest rates artificially low to bail out these crooked bankers all day long, then we're just going to put it in Bitcoin and give them the big FU and say, look, you motherfuckers, this is America. It's based on savings, not spending, you cunts. So we're going to buy Bitcoin. Go fuck yourself.
I don't think you could say the C word if you're not in possession of one, just so you know. So,
well, I'm an hermaphrodite. I think people are pretty clear on that,
I think, let's move off that topic and move to the next one. So I'm thinking that Swan Lake meets the flying sparkly orange shoe, like could be a new interpretation of that. Like we could do some sort of...
Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. La, 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 la. Let me do a spin move up in the air. A beautiful move.
Smash
comes
those
down.
buys right now.
Smash those buys.
Smash your buys.
Smash your buys right now.
I think we're about to lose our new sponsor.
We just lost our new sponsor. Who's next?
Who wants to sponsor
us? Who else
now?
wants to sponsor us? We can't. Don't go away. Don't get it no more.
No, but because Max stopped using Cash App and started using Swan Bitcoin to do his smash buys.
Cash App sucks.
So since Max stopped using Cash App and started using Swan
They
Bitcoin,
heard you the first time.
Yeah, but I'm trying to get
it's a mix.
I'm trying to get something clean for myself.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
I want this clean for myself.
Fine, do it clean one. Do it clean.
Because Max stopped using cashapp.com, instead started using swanbitcoin.com, and he saved enough money to buy $7 orange sparkly shoes. So I think, this is something for you to aspire to. Get off Cash App, get off Coinbase, get off all the other junky sites, and go to swanbitcoin.com, and you too could have some orange sparkly shoes.
Yeah. Very clean. Very elegant. That's beautiful.
Don't.
Kudos. Bravosi.
Don't step on my performance.
It's a mix. It's like, we're in concert. Let's give them the shirt. Love Hodl.
Love Hodl.
See? Love Hodl.
I think that's cute. Hodl love. See, they go. You could say it either way: hodl love or love hodl. That's that brings me to. Of course, we talked about Alex Gladstein. He works on human rights. I mean, mostly in third world countries or developing nations, or a lot of nations that America doesn't like. But I want to talk about Putin because he mentioned, the notion of Bitcoin as a mind virus.
Okay.
And, RT is responsible, I believe, because they distribute Kaiser Report, which we make independently and then sell to them. is they distribute it without question and have done so, and then translate it or dub it into Spanish. They're responsible for like such a wide, fair distribution of Bitcoin, unprecedented in history before Wall Street got involved. So we've had people all across Latin America, all across Asia, all across Africa watch Kaiser Report from 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. Ala Kanani learned about Bitcoin from Kaiser Report in 2012, and she got involved in Botswana and has the Satoshi Center that she ran from 2014. So, it's this mind virus that has spread wide and far and deep, not deep yet. Like it's like all the orange-pilled people around the world. There's like a sleeper cells of orange-pilled people around the world. But you think about Bitcoin at all and it infects you, right? Putin is now talking about ... love. The secret to a happy family life, love. And the secret to good international relations, you guessed it, also love, says Putin. In the 5th hour of his press conference, things are beginning to get weird. So, I mean, this is a guy from, the U.S. State press, which is, Voice of America. But the thing about it is, like, he was mocking it. But the thing is, like, I saw that and I thought, wow, that sounds like Max. Like, Max is always talking about love. This is his favorite T-shirt. He's always, like, banging on about love.
That's right. It has an incredible impact on folks. And Bitcoin is the monetization of love. And if you think about Bitcoin, you're in parallel thinking about love. And we know that Putin's been talking about Bitcoin. He made comments about it several times. And as you point out on our show, it's been talked about for 10 years and it plays in 100 different countries and billions of people have seen it. So now the germination, the flowers of the unconscious that I spoke about earlier are flowering in the minds of people all over the world, including President Putin, who's now talking about love. And he's absolutely right. It's the single unifying force in the universe. And Bitcoin provides cover for anybody who wants to talk about love, who maybe was hesitant for whatever reason. They now have a free pass to talk about love because they're stinking rich. And when you're stinking rich, you can say pretty much anything you want. Nobody's going to question you because they want some of what you got. So that's why it's so much easier for me to talk about love, because anybody who might criticize me would not get the benefit of knowing me and the fact that I am stinking Bitcoin rich. So they get barred from the Telegram group by Stacy and her silver hammer, her Bitcoin hammer. You come in, and if you go off the track, off piste, you get banned with the orange sparkly shoe, the Bitcoin shoe. You get
Bitcoin shoe
smashed in the face with Stacy's Bitcoin shoe. So it's all about love. Love is the gateway. Love is the path. Love is the vector. The vector is love. God is love. Love is going straight to the face of God. And we're going to see the face of God here in a few months at $400,000 per Bitcoin.
In fact,
I feel like I'm watching Marcel.
that Bitcoin hammer shoe that I have in the Orange Pill podcast group, that is love for the group.
Exactly.
Because you don't want a fiat pooper in there, right? They come in there, they fart really loud or they fart really quiet and stinky, and they mess up, they ruin the vibe of the group. Like, who wants that, right? You have to kick them out. You say, go back to fiat, go ask for your MMT, go...
Hi is a scam.
Go lobby AOC and ask for some UBI. Just get out of this group. Like, you don't belong here.
That's not love.
That's not love.
MMT is not love. UBI is not love. Money printing is not love. Fiat money is not love. Fiat love is not fiat. It's not love. You want real love. Real love is scarcity. It's value. It's Bitcoin. It's appreciation. It's that attitude that says, I don't want to do or say anything at this moment that would take me out of love. And that means that I wouldn't go into the Telegram group with Max and Stacy and lay down a big stinky one, because I'm defeatist and I am a pessimist and I see the world as half empty and I'm an incel and I don't have any Bitcoin. If you have any Bitcoin, it does change the way you think. It changes the way you communicate with people. It changes your appreciation of the world around you. And it all adds up to 10,000 in the Telegram group. That's where we're headed by the end of the next week. I think we're going to be in 10,000 in that Telegram group. And wherever we go on any podcast, They'll say, come on our podcast. And we're like, okay, yeah. We bring our posse from the Telegram group, and there's 500, 600, 700 people now live streaming. And they're like, holy shit, this is the most we've ever had live streaming. That's the power of love. That's it. You know, it's the power of love, as was mentioned by
James Brown.
Yeah, he definitely, James Brown
was all about love.
He was on the one. He was on the one. And the one is love, and love is the one. You know, James Brown, he invented funk. I mean, that's how powerful James Brown is. Think about that. Okay, Satoshi, Bitcoin, great. But think about James Brown invented funk. Jesus fucking Christ, man. I mean, that was a human being that did that.
And James Brown was so amazing that he could actually shoot at the cops and live to see.
And they were happy about it.
They were happy.
They were like, I got shot at by James Brown. I'm feeling great. You know, that's what the funk does to you. That's funky. They can't be no funkier than shooting at the cops and having the cops seek your autograph. You know, like, James, thanks for shooting at me. Can you sign this?
I'm never going to have this bullet removed.
Right. I'm keeping this bullet in. That's my James Brown bullet because I'm in the hot damn.
No, but, you know, the thing about this, like the whole social justice warrior sort of movement combining with MMT and UBI is like, that is like ripping a loud fart into everybody else's savings and hard work and their labor. Like you're degrading, you're inflating away the value of their labor, their hours, their time that they can never get back. And when you check out your savings account in, say you have $10,000 in the bank, and at the end of the year, when you have to report how much interest they paid you on it, you're like, oh, they paid me 4 cents, and you have to report it to the IRS, and you're like, thank you, all you jerks, who the MMTers and UBIers and money printers, like they say that they're printing that money to help these individuals that they decided are worth saving, and at the expense of everybody else. Like, you don't need to make that trade-off now. You don't need to do that.
And they're not helping them.
They're not helping anybody.
A little baby sucking on a mama's teeth, right? At some point, mama got to say, you got to get off my teeth, right? Because you got to go live your life. You can't just suckle your baby for 30, 40, 50 years. That's not the way it works. Okay, baby got to wake up, start his own life. And that's great for the baby. Baby's happy. Nothing more satisfying than getting a job, making some money, and being self-sustaining, sovereign individual. Right? It's not satisfying to your soul to be sucking on your mama's teeth when you're 35 years old. It's not right. So you gotta show some tough love. There's love and there's tough love.
We've seen some documentaries. The BBC is good. That's what they do well, is those nature documentaries. And Adam Smith, one of the founders of the Enlightenment ideas, and of course capitalism, he said that markets should mimic nature, right? And that's one thing about nature is, if you look at it, almost all animals do this. Is mom has to kick the 2-year-old out of the gang. You know, all sorts of lions, antelope, whatever. And it's sad. Like, it's hard to watch. Like, if I were overseeing this ranch of these animals, I'd be like, oh, let him stay. Like, can't kick poor Johnny away. Like, it's just so sweet. He's so cute and he loves you. Like, mom, you're so horrible to kick him away. But they bark at them, growl at them, and like tell them to go away, shoo them away. And the 2-year-old, the yearling or whatever, just like looks so sad. And it's like, why are you turning on me? And they're like, you got to go. It's time to go live on your own. And
right now in the U.S., this has been building for decades. So, you go all the way back many decades. And this idea of vilifying savings, they call it the paradox of thrift. They call it a savings glut. They use language to vilify savings, as if savings is evil and that people should not save because people should actually be in debt because the economy works. The GDP grows the more you're in debt. And that is a very pernicious and ugly and destructive meme. Now, during the decades when interest rates, the past 40 years, interest rates have gone down for 40 years. It's the inverse of that, of course, would be the bond price going up. And we've been in the biggest bond rally in maybe, I would say, in history. Yeah. Certainly, interest rates have never been this low in America for 240 years or in Great Britain for over 300 years. So that bond rally is totally historic. And that cheap money, which has fueled this debt boom, is removed what it means to be an individual and not dependent on the state. So they have created state dependency through money printing and artificially low interest rates. And that's where we're at in America today. And that's why you have so much confusion out there, because there are these groups vying for handouts from the government. And but nobody's actually standing up for of the values of thrift and the values of savings. If they do, let's say a Ron Paul, for example, they get branded as what do they call them? New right or neo right?
Alt-right.
Alt-right.
Yeah.
So they have a phrase called alt-right, that anybody who thinks that not being in debt to the state is a bad idea, they become alt-right. And then like Piers Morgan will go on CNN and say, who are these alt-right people? And they have all these casts of lunatics who go on mainstream media and they just parrot all the talking points from the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Pentagon. And that's called propaganda, in case you weren't sure. And it's confusing for most people. So into this mix comes Bitcoin. And, Bitcoin is a savings technology. And what we're finding now, 10 years into it, is that a lot of people have gone through the looking glass and they're saying, you know what? I'm actually now completely divorced from this notion of state dependency. And I don't give a shit anymore. Let the state fall for all I care, because the idea of America is never going to go away, even though they fucked it up badly. And I've got my fuck you money with Bitcoin. It's unconfiscatable. It's immutable. And I'm here for the show at this point. I'm here for the ride, because the forces of monetization, indebtedness, and quantitative easing and negative interest rates have now reached beyond the tipping point. The Titanic, that is the global economy. It's the people in the rear of the boat, like a Jeff Bezos. He doesn't think he's sinking into the ocean because he's worth 200 billion, but that's dollars, right?
Yeah.
So if you have no Bitcoin, you're broke. So it doesn't matter. Like 200 billion is not going to buy you a safe passage off the Titanic. That is the fiat money system. And a few people like Michael Saylor, not to beat his drum too much, but he's a guy who will be somebody in the post-fiat bitpocalypse that is going to be in a position to do something meaningful, do something constructive. And so is everybody who owns Bitcoin. Anybody who's got any Satoshis at all and runs a full node, you're part of the solution and part of this post fiat money apocalypse dilemma that is, I think, happening in 2021. I don't see it really being extended. We've been talking about it for 10 years. We made a film 12 years ago called Death of the Dollar. And we've been talking about this fiat money problem with GATA. Remember them, the Gold Antitrust Action Committee? That's where we got very interested in GATA 12 years ago, and how the gold price was being suppressed, which was a conspiracy theory at the time. Now it's a conspiracy fact. And so 12 years later, which is an eye blink in the history of money, we're going to see this now. We're going to see a capitulation by those who are holding dollars and fiat money, and they're going to give it up. We see it in the commodities market right now. Iron ore skyrocketing. We've got the price of copper skyrocketing. Agriculture is skyrocketing. Even the price of oil is moving higher. That's inflation, real inflation. And you're going to see it at the store. For real. They can't hide it anymore with the hedonic adjustments, and all the financial engineering and all the propaganda is not going to hide from people that their grocery bill just doubled. Their cost of energy just doubled. There's nothing no one's going to say or do to convince somebody that they didn't just pay double for groceries and energy than they paid 6 months ago. And that's when it gets real. And that's happening in 2021.
Yes.
We're bracing for it. We're ready for it. And, it's orange pill. Orange pill is after the red pill. And we took the red pill years ago. Now.
And after orange pill comes orange juice.
Then comes the orange shoe, right? Then comes the, you tell me what comes next. We're all in this together.
Exactly. No more fiat flatulence. No more. Like, keep that out of the room. Keep that in a different world. Like, we're the escape hatch. Orange Pill Podcast is the escape hatch. to a better. It's the exit plan, right? It's plan B. It's the Orange Shoe podcast.
Yeah, I think that makes it all clear for people.
Right. So I think that's it for this episode of Sats, Margs, and Orange Pill.
I think
Brought
that
to
covers
you.
it.
Brought to you
Do
by
you want to
who?
do that clean?
Who was this brought to you by, Max?
The Margarita Mix Company.
swanbitcoin.com/Stacy.
Oh, I see. It's come to that, has it?
Right. So visit swanbitcoin.com and they're helping us deliver this content to you, and they are doing an amazing job. They have Swan Signal, they have Swan Lounge, great guests all the time, including Max, including myself. And they're very like-minded. So join their Telegram group as well. And I'm glad they're sponsoring us, because I think or at least they sponsored this episode.
I'm glad they were sponsoring us about 20 minutes ago. It was great having them as a sponsor.
Where's the swan? Like, let's see off on another swan rendition.
Da, 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 da. Hey, where can a fella get some grub around here? Where's Plucky? I miss Plucky. Get Plucky out here. I was told that Plucky would be on the show, and all I'm sat here with a goddamn shoe. I want Plucky. I need Plucky. Give me some Plucky.